Welcome back, Ronin Renegades. I'm Lupine Fiasco. This is daily FaB gameplay, and today's game is against FaB, the Rising Rebellion. For anyone who is new to the channel, welcome to the Resistance. What we do here is review replays of games that I've played on the Talishar client days or weeks ago, after enough time has passed that I lose my bias and can more objectively judge my gameplay. I'll walk through turn cycles as if I were taking them now while explaining my thought process for the lines that I take, and we'll compare that to what I did in the past. We either learn from our mistakes or reinforce good play patterns. And of course, the reason to do all this is to tighten and optimize our play in the future, take down paper events, and walk away with that shiny, shiny cardboard. Without further ado, let's jump into our sideboard and our game plan. Today's game features my harmonized Kadachi list. If you would like to check that list out on FaB or try it for yourself on Talishar, you can find the deck link in the video description below. While you're down there, if you have not already done so, please consider subscribing to my channel. It is the best free way to support me, and make sure you see daily FaB gameplay in your video feed 5 days a week. We have won the die roll, and we are going to choose to go second. This is ideal in any aggro mirror, as it gives us the opportunity to take tempo on our turn one after blocking out our opponent's turn one, then drawing up to intellect at the end of their turn. This is especially important against FaB, as we know that we will be able to pressure the hand at least twice in a turn cycle with our Kadachis and Mask of Momentum. If we are getting FaB to block 2 times over the course of a turn cycle, he can put less pressure on us, which means that we have to block less frequently and can keep up the tempo. Getting into our equipment, we are not going to make any changes. Kadachis and Mask of Momentum are the ideal weapon-mask combo for this matchup, as we do want to be pressuring our opposing FaB into making blocks. Our Flamescale Furnace is an extra 2 points of life over the Fyendal Spring Tunic, and because these games are so short, we would not expect to get more than 1 activation out of a Fyendal Spring Tunic, and we are better off with the Furnace. Ninja does not deal arcane damage at this point in time, so we have no need for Spell Void or Arcane Barrier. Getting into the deck itself, we are going to make one swap here, which is Command and Conquer for Enlightened Strike. Command and Conquer is especially good against Ninja to disrupt the sideboard, and especially good against FaB, whose power level goes way up with a 5th card in the arsenal. Enlightened Strike, while great and very versatile, is not so good on an Art of War turn, and the way that we will win an aggro mirror is by setting up a big Art of War turn and blowing out our opponent. E-Strike is above rate, but can be clunky if we want to use our Snapdragon Scalers for a traditional finisher like Lava Burst or Salt the Wound, or if we have already used our Snapdragon Scalers. E-Strike just does not present the raw power that a Command and Conquer does, so we're going to board out 2. The game plan for FaB should be pretty familiar to us by this point. What do we hate when our opponents do to us? We can just do that back. So we'll block important breakpoints, we will sequence well so that it is difficult for the opposing FaB to block our Mask of Momentum triggers. We are not afraid to give up our Tiger Stripe Shuko on blocks early, knowing that the game is going to end pretty quickly. And if we need to, we can take a bunch of damage to enable a big Art of War that will blow out our opponent. Overall, this game is probably not going to last any more than 5 turns, and we should play accordingly. You know the game plan, you know the sideboard. Let's jump into the match and see how it all comes together. Phoenix Flame goes to discard on both sides, and we are in it. Our opposing FaB opening with a Brand of the Cinderclaw. We are happy to block that. This hand is a bit clunky with the Art of War, so we are going to take a little more damage here than we might necessarily want to on turn 1. What that means is we're going to take this Kodachi attack. Normally I would want to block the second Kodachi, but here we are going to take it. We'll overblock this Phoenix Flame in order to prevent the card draw. We also save our 3 block, where I would be more interested in keeping a Brand with Cinderclaw for my turn. I want to maximize my block value. For this hand, I am not necessarily interested in throwing the Art of War so early, but I do want to pressure my opposing FaB off of at least 2 cards if possible. We know from playing the deck that Kodachi FaB can present 6 chain links and 2 Mask of Momentum threats off of a 4-card hand. And with FaB's arsenal, he has a 5-card hand. So if we can take him off of 2 cards, that would be ideal. Unfortunately, we don't have the hand for it, with this Art of War kind of clunking up the works. So what I actually like doing here is sending Kodachi Rising Resentment, and we'll see how our opposing FaB blocks. If we get 1 3-block from hand, I am actually interested in playing the Art of War and banishing our Ronin Renegade to get Rising Resentment over the top. We have no floating energy, but we do draw 3 cards. 2 from the Art of War and 1 from the Mask of Momentum trigger, and maybe that is enough damage to pressure our FaB into giving us more on blocks. But we'll start with our 2 Kodachis and see where the turn goes. Throwing the Rising Resentment, we do get a 3-block from our opposing FaB, so we're going to fire off this Art of War. Drawing into a pretty good couple of cards here. If we draw 1 from the Mask of Momentum, E-Strike becomes a lot better. We are met with an opposing Art of War to fix the hand and block out the Rising Resentment. That's pretty good for us, actually. Based on what our FaB pitched and banished, we can say that their hand probably was not ideal for an Art of War. So rather than risk taking a bunch of damage from our turn, they can give up a little potential tempo to slow us down. All we're going to do with this hand is throw the Blaze Headlong for 5 and Arsenal our E-Strike. It isn't great, but this E-Strike would be better served as a head jab. As it is, it's a strong Arsenal card that can fix potentially clunky hands and pairs very well with our Snapdragon Scalers. We lose 1 point of damage by not E-striking, bottoming Blaze Headlong, and drawing a card, but we know that our arsenal is very strong. If we had chosen to draw, we would have been arsenaling a Brand with Cinderclaw Blue, which is very weak. Drawing into another Art of War, this is really the ideal setup for us, right? Is that we are taking tempo right away by going second. We are also drawing our Art of Wars before our opponent does, especially we are resolving our Art of Wars before our opponent does. But bear with me, this is a good game. We aren't just going to stomp a FaB. How are we going to block this? Well, we could choose not to. We could play out our second Art of War here, pitch our Warmonger's Diplomacy, banish our Lava Vein Loyalty, and play out the rest of this turn. But I am also interested in just slowing down my opposing FaB while setting up a better Art of War turn that doesn't involve Enlightened Strike. So here I'm fine to block this Ronin Renegade with Warmonger's Diplomacy. On our turn, we'll send Kodachi E-Strike and arsenal the Art of War. Let's see what our opposing FaB does. I'm expecting that they pass the turn. We will start out with our Kodachis, and we have a choice of what we want to do with our E-Strike. E-Strike for 7 draws us a card most likely. FaB probably doesn't want to block for 7, which is going to cost them multiple cards from hand or multiple pieces of equipment. The problem with this is that we draw for Mask Momentum, then pass the turn. Having that choice of what we stick into the arsenal is good, but I kind of like threatening playing the Mask of Momentum draw here. So if I was taking this turn now, I think that I would want to E-strike for 5 go again, which puts just a little more pressure on our opposing FaB. We have 1 resource floating, so anything besides a Command and Conquer is playable off the top of our deck. Ideally something like a Mounting Anger or a Soaring Strike. But if we could draw even into just a Brand with Cinderclaw or a Ronin Renegade, that pushes a little more damage. So if I was taking this now, I would do 5 with go again. As it is, we do go for 7, pushing a bit of damage here. FaB wisely decides not to block, and we are going to arsenal our Art of War and draw into a really good hand to fire off this Art of War. We are met with an opposing Art of War. So we will see if we need to block anything. I really don't want to. The first on the docket is a harmonized Kodachi, followed by a second one. We have a choice to make here. I can either save equipment to block whatever comes next, which would trigger Mask of Momentum, but if that attack is a 4 power that now is bumped up to a 5 power by Art of War, we have to block it from hand if we want to stop the damage and the mask trigger. And I don't want to block from hand because this hand is really good. So I'm going to block this Kodachi with the Flamescale Furnace to stop the mask trigger. Now I'm fully confident that FaB can send another mask trigger this turn with 3 cards in hand and 2 resources floating. But what stopping the first mask trigger does is limits FaB's potential options going into the rest of the turn. He doesn't get to see what is on the top of his deck until he is out of cards in hand, and potentially has bad sequencing or would have liked to play out the hand differently if he knew what was on top of the deck. But as it is, we are just going to take the rest of this damage. If FaB draws a card here, that's fine. We have a life point lead, so we can afford to give up damage here. Thankfully, due to some sequencing, we can stop the Mask Momentum trigger with our Shuko, and without knowing what is in our opposing FaB's hand, I suppose that would have been my advice, is don't throw a Phoenix Flame for your Mask Momentum trigger. But we'll see if he plays this out. So this is a breaking point. I think if I was our opposing FaB, I would have thrown the breaking point instead of the Phoenix Flame. The mask trigger is now on a breaking point, which I might not have been incentivized to block, but now I am, and I need to give up quite a few cards to stop this breaking point. If the breaking point hits, our FaB could use Snapdragon Scalers or just arsenal the card that they draw, which is assuredly better than a Phoenix Flame. If the breaking point doesn't hit, then FaB has the Draconic Links to pick up the Phoenix Flame and stick it in arsenal. So just something that I can comment on as a FaB player who has now seen the opposing turn. We are going to block this breaking point for 6. Keep our Art of War safe in arsenal, and just send 7 damage back on our turn. Maybe we scare our opposing FaB into blocking this Blaze Headlong, but more likely we just mitigate some damage by stopping the breaking point, send 7 back, and set up for another Art of War turn. With only 2 blocks in hand, and this Art of War in arsenal, I'm not super excited about blocking here, so hopefully our opposing FaB isn't going to make us. Here this Bittering Thorns is going to trigger Mask Momentum, and I'm fine to let it happen. This is the sort of decision that we would have taken last turn if our Art of War wasn't threatened, but here we're just going to take all this damage because we're going to give back more than what we got. So we're just taking damage here, and that's fine. We're even going to take this snatch. If FaB wants to blind snap it, he can, and he chooses not to. So on our turn, with our Art of War in arsenal and our Snapdragon Scalers available, we are going to open with Snatch. And we're hoping to get 2 pieces of armor from our opposing FaB, blocking exactly 4, which will let us Art of War over the top of blocks. We can also use our Snapdragon Scalers to give the Snatch go again. If FaB blocks for 5 here with armor and a 3 block from hand, that's a little unfortunate, but we still get to keep going, and we just put our FaB down to 4 cards instead of 5, which is still a win for us. Banishing the Rising Resentment instead of the Brand with Cinderclaw. With no Draconic links on the chain currently, Brand is a stronger card in hand, as it will let us turn a Kodachi Draconic. If we already had a Draconic link on the chain, or somehow had another Draconic starter in hand, I would want to keep the Rising Resentment just in case we draw something like a Mounting Anger. So with 1 link on the chain that is hit, we need 2 more links to threaten the Mask of Momentum trigger. This is a bit odd sequencing. I believe the line here is Brand with Cinderclaw, Mounting Anger. We have our blue Brand and our blue Soulbead Strike. The Soulbead Strike can be pitched to Kodachis, and the Brand will create our next 2 Draconic links to pick up the Phoenix Flame. So we're sending a 4 power and 5 power attack at our FaB, which is going to threaten the Mask of Momentum trigger. Then following it up with a slightly worse Mask of Momentum threat, but we're still taking cards out of our opposing FaB's hand. Choosing to throw a Kodachi here instead does make sense. Let's see how I am finishing it up. Throwing the Mounting Anger and pitching Brand with Cinderclaw. Getting 6 block from our opposing FaB is really, really good news for us. We can finish up this turn with Brand with Cinderclaw, Kodachi, Phoenix Flame. Phoenix Flame, of course, is a Mask of Momentum trigger, and we can either arsenal or save our Soulbead Strike. I'm going to throw it here. It's 3 points of damage, and without a Snapdragon Scalers, I really don't want this Soulbead Strike in arsenal. I would rather just get some points of damage. It was a very good turn from us. I don't think we sequenced it quite correctly. I think maybe if we had thrown the Mounting Anger sooner or later, the turn would have gone better for us. But of course, as it is, we make up our life deficit and are now staring down a Blaze Headlong that would take us to 4. FaB still has the Snapdragon Scalers available. We don't know anything about what is in their arsenal because a Snatch put it there. This could be another Blaze Headlong. It could be a Snatch. It could be something that we need to block. But as it is, we don't need to block this Blaze Headlong. So we're just going to take this damage and see if our FaB is going to snap it. He doesn't. So we'll go to 4. And now we get to throw back some heat. Without our Snapdragon Scalers, we have 2 finishers in our hand and cannot play both of them. So we're going to pitch our Salt the Wound to Kodachi Mounting Anger. We can start this turn with Mounting Anger to bait FaB into blocking. Follow that with Brand with Cinderclaw, Harmonized Kodachi, Phoenix Flame, Lava Burst. We are lamenting the loss of our Tiger Stripe Shuko here, but we're still going to push a lot of damage this turn and put a lot of pressure on FaB to block it. FaB choosing not to block the Mounting Anger, which doesn't tell us much about their hand. They could be hoping to weather the storm. They could also just have 2 blocks and not want to give us 2 cards so early into our turn. This does get blocked by an E-Strike, so I almost would have wanted to see them block with a 3 block and the Furnace on our Mounting Anger, but we'll see what the rest of this turn looks like for us. Going to pick up and play our Phoenix Flame and follow that with a Lava Burst. Phoenix Flame gets blocked. We will throw the Lava Burst for 5. This is going to get at least 2 cards from our opposing FaB's hand, and it does, putting him to 1. We find ourselves in a very good spot. Ravenous Rabble here only coming for 3 instead of 4. So we have a couple of choices for blocking this. Again, we have 2 attacks in our hand without Go Again. So I would like to block this Ravenous Rabble with either the Breaking Point or the CNC. We're going to choose to block with Command and Conquer here. We'll save our armor. On our turn, we can pitch our blue brand to Kadachi Breaking Point, which should take all 4 cards out of FaB's hand, leaving an Art of War in arsenal that will win the game for us on our next turn. Instead, blocking the Rabble with armor, I think choosing to keep the Command and Conquer there was objectively wrong. There is a line where we send a Breaking Point here, get exactly 5 block, then play the Art of War, but we aren't doing that. So I guess playing the Command and Conquer here in order to punish our FaB playing defense reactions, but FaBs don't really do that. I would rather have the armor. As it is, we arsenal our Art of War. We draw into a blue for our Kadachis and a double strike. The game ends here, so we aren't necessarily punished for that weird block, but the point of these games, of course, is to practice proper sequencing, practice good play, and I think keeping the Command and Conquer and giving up armor to strip the FaB's hand, which we would have done anyway, was just very, very loose. I'm learning recently that I have a tendency to block early with armor, earlier than I should, rather than sacrifice cards in my hand that are clunky or unwieldy to play. So that is something that I'm going to want to work on, especially now that I'm seeing this game and realizing that I have a pattern of making loose blocking choices. We do pick up the win here off of the back of some very good Art of Wars, but I think that this game was a good example of that decision making of when you want to take a ton of damage to give it back and when you might not want to. We were fully prepared to take all of the opposing FaB's Art of War damage to fire off our own Art of War until we saw that breaking point, which made us abandon the Art of War strategy to defend and wait for another turn. And I don't know if that is a decision that I always would have been willing to make. I might have sacrificed that Art of War to fire off an okay turn, and I'm glad that I'm learning not to do that. So hopefully all of you learned something from this as well. Dash.io is the new hotness on the block. She does not present as much disruption as Lexi did. So we are all going to need to get used to playing in these big aggro smackdowns where it's all raw damage, very few on hits, and the sort of decision making that comes with that. If you did learn something from this video, if you did enjoy watching this game, or if you are just as excited to play post Lexi as I am, head jab that like button for me. My comments are always open if you have any questions or feedback. Otherwise, I will see you back here tomorrow for more daily FaB gameplay. Take care.